Hello and welcome back, and thanks for watching. It's April 2025 and we have a new release of Lightroom and Photoshop. Photoshop version 26.60 and Lightroom version 14.3. And in both these versions there are some useful updates, and there are also some other updates that are maybe, not quite so useful. So let's jump in and have a look. So the first and most important update that occurs with both Lightroom and Photoshop is a new profile that was in the beta version or in the hardware preview in Photoshop, but is now available in Lightroom. And that is, if you go to the profile section in the develop module, click on Adobe Color, you now have the option of a profile called adaptive color, and that makes quite a big difference to most images. It uses some sort of AI technology to examine the image and apply some adjustments. And if I go back to the standard Adobe Color, you'll see that it's fairly flat. It was photographed in pretty flat light, but if I go then back to the adaptive color, it's given the image a better starting off point. And in addition to the profile for adaptive color, we now have an amount slider, so we can use more of it if we want or less of it, and that is a major advantage in starting off with an image that's going to look a little bit better to begin with. Now, the same profile is available in Photoshop, but to access it you have to then open your image in Photoshop 2025, but open it as a smart object in Photoshop. If you just open it normally and then try and use the camera raw filter, you won't have access to this adaptive profile. You need to open it as a smart object in Photoshop, and we'll have a look over at Photoshop now and you'll see how it works. Here's the object, the file opened in Photoshop with no profile, nothing applied to it. It's a smart object. I double click on it to enter the camera raw processing, and you'll see up here under profile, we click on that, we have adaptive color as well as the other ones that have always been there. So either way you've got access to this new profile, and it certainly makes a difference before you get started on editing your image. So that's valuable update number one. And I should point out before we move on to the next set of updates is that by using this adaptive color profile, we're not actually making any adjustments to the image. All we're doing is interpreting that base raw file information in a slightly different way using some clever algorithms that Adobe's created. And so this is just a different way of interpreting that base information from the image. Now, the next lot of enhancements or new tools available in Lightroom and Photoshop are a little less obvious. You need to go into the masking area. We have this new category called landscape. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer here because it's not really just about landscape. It's about using some smart tools within Lightroom and Photoshop to identify different parts of the image and create separate masks for each area. So let's just have a look. If we click on landscape, it will go in and it will start to look at what options there are in the image for different areas. And if we look down here, here's the mask options. So we hover on the word sky, we can see the sky mask. Yes, I want a mask on the sky. And it's also found what it calls mountains, which is pretty much everything else in the image, bar the buildings. So yes, that would be useful. And then if we come down again, we've got what they call architecture, which is anything built in the form of buildings or man-made objects. So yes, we'll have that. And it's also found what it calls water, which is probably not entirely all water, but let's create that mask as well. So it's automatically detected various elements within the photograph. And what we're going to do is we're going to tick this box that says create 4 separate masks, and then create mask. And it will go ahead and create all of those different masks. And they all appear here as masks in our masking panel. And of course, if we click on each individual one, then we can make adjustments and do whatever we would like to do with the various parts of the image. Let's just have a look at the architecture, for instance. Well, maybe I want to brighten that up a little bit, and maybe I want to add a little more contrast. So it's done a pretty good job of selecting out those different areas. But of course, let's have a look at the mountains area. Well, it's selected the mountains, but it's left the rocks and various other things. So in this case, I'd probably say, look, I just want to adjust all of those areas. So what I would do now with this, I would say, let's add to that. Let's get a brush and let's brush all those areas in, leaving the buildings alone. But look, all of those other bits of rocks and things, and probably what it's called water, could probably just be included in this as well. So even though it's created the initial masks, we can obviously add and subtract things to them as we go along, and just depending on what you want to do. So there we go. There's the mountains, and let's say we want to add a little bit more contrast. Maybe we want to warm it up. I'm just using this as an example. Give it a little bit more warmth and a little bit more contrast. Yeah, that's looking fine. And then we can move on to the next sections and go there. We've got the architecture. We can, maybe we should just brighten those buildings up a little bit more. Select the architecture, brighten those up a little bit more. Well, not too much, just a tiny bit. But you can see the value of the tools here is it's made the selection process a lot simpler and a lot easier, but it's not perfect, of course. So if I click on architecture, you'll see that it's missed a little bit over here. So we would probably add to that and modify it, but it will certainly speed up the process as we go along. So that's a valuable tool. So let's quickly look at another image just to see that same process. It works pretty well in most cases, but again, it's not perfect. So let's firstly change from our standard Adobe color to the adaptive color profile, and you can see straight away it's made quite a difference to that image, and we might even increase that a little bit. And then of course we can go in and make our selections. Click on the landscape and let it find the different areas that it will identify as different parts of the image. Now, depending on your computer speed, this may take a little bit of time to generate the masks, and depends also on how complicated the image is. And so in some cases it may be a bit of a slow process, and you might be better off just, if you just wanted to make one selection, say of the sky, it might be a little simpler to just do that. But let's just go through the process. Yes, it's found the sky, it's found mountains. Well, it's found this is mountain, and it thinks that little bit of cloud on the horizon is also mountain. But let's just play its game and say, yes, well, here's the architecture, vegetation, water, and it's found another category called natural ground. So let's just assume that we want all those masks. Once it's done that work detecting things, it's probably just as easy to allow it to create all those masks. So again, we can play with the exposure, we can add things to it. Let's just have a look at the water. Yep, you know what, the water is a little bit dark. We can just lighten that a bit. And so as you go through, you can see that in most cases it's doing a pretty good job. But as I said, it's not perfect, but it's certainly a quick way to get some initial masking in place. Bearing in mind that if you make really large adjustments, you are still probably going to end up with halos around edges and things. And so if your masking is really critical, you probably need to go to Photoshop to refine that even more. But this is a really good starting off point. Now the next new tool that we need to have a look at is a tool that's designed to remove reflections from glass, particularly when you photograph something through a window such as this image. And in Lightroom, if we go into our remove tool, we don't have any option to remove reflections. So you can't do it from Lightroom, you have to do it in Photoshop. So here's the same image, I've just opened it in Photoshop. It doesn't need to be a smart object. We can just open the image as normally and just go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and in this case we go to the Remove Tool section, and you'll see now there's a thing called Distraction Removal, and we have reflections or we have people. We're not going to worry about people at this point. Let's just look at the reflections. We need to click the button that says Apply, and it will go away and calculate. And sometimes it'll take a little while to work this out, but it's rather clever in that it works out what is a reflection and what is the base image. So once it's finished doing that, we now have, here's our image with the reflections removed, and you can see there's a big difference. Now if I take this slider all the way back, you'll see here this is 0, this is as it was, but if I keep going to the left, it will actually show me what other reflections. So that's rather clever. It's picked up all these reflections and removed them, and so that's what we started off with all those nasty reflections, and by using that slider it's removed, well, not quite all of them, but most of them. So it again is a tool that has got its uses in some cases. It's not perfect, but it certainly works quite well for a number of cases where you've got nasty window reflections. And if I wanted to use this image, it's not a great photograph, but I could probably remove those with the remove tool. But certainly it's made a big difference to the photograph, and it then just applies that, and of course we'll need to make some other adjustments. But that's a tool that's only available in the Camera Raw filter in Photoshop. So looking at another example, again taken from this same photographic shoot, looking through a window, and we have some items on a tabletop with reflections in the tabletop, but also reflections in the glass. And if I've already applied the reflections removal tool, and you'll see that if I slide this up to 100%, it's getting rid of all of these reflections here, but it doesn't take away the reflections in the tabletop. So it's quite selective in what it's going to choose to remove. And if I go back the other way, it's pretty much identified just these areas on the right hand side as being the reflections, but it won't affect the reflections in the tabletop. So just bear that in mind. It's only really good for when you're looking through a window or you've got reflections in a window. So even so, it's a very good tool to have. Now this next tool again only is used in Photoshop, and it's called the remove tool that removes people or distracting people. Now for this example, I've got an image here that's a really old photograph that was scanned from a slide that's had a lot of other work done to it to make it into an acceptable image. But of course we've got some people in the background that are not ideal. These young girls here were posing for the photograph, and I'd really like to get rid of these people. So bearing in mind this is a Photoshop file, we don't need to work on a raw file. I've just made a duplicate of the image. Let's go into the filter, Camera Raw filter, and let's see what the remove people tool will do for the image. Now again we go into the remove tool, in this case people. Now it looks for distracting people. Now it's been pretty good in that it's found some people here, some part of a person here, and of course this man and a few other people in the background. Now let's just assume that we wanted to get rid of all of these people, but if I decided I didn't want to remove some of these people, I could just click on this little pin and hit the delete key. Well, let's just do that. Click on that, hit the delete key. Now those people are excluded from the remove tool, so we'll leave those two people in, but we'll remove the others. And so let's just click on remove, and of course it goes away and does a fair bit of processing. This does take a little bit of time, again depending on the speed of your processor and how much memory you have, but well, it's certainly removed this person here and these people here. I'm not quite sure what's happened here, so I think I would just click on that, delete that, leave those people in the background. It's made a bit of a hash of them. Those people were excluded anyway, but look, it's done a pretty good job of constructing a background in here. Here's the area. If I click on it, it's selected all of those things and removed them. So let's just say OK, and we'll take that back in. And of course this layer is the top layer. If I turn that off, we can see what we had before. It's not only found the people, but it's found the reflections. So in some instances this is going to be a really valuable tool, but as we found with that little part of a person in the background there, it wasn't quite perfect, but it certainly is a very useful tool to have. Again, only in Photoshop in the Camera Raw filter. Now these next two tools, the final two that we're going to have a look at, are only available in Photoshop. And the first one we're going to have a look at is a new way of making selections where the software will attempt to identify people. So if we go into our selection tools, and if we click and hold on here, we've amongst the Other tools, we've got the object selection tool. We just select that, and up in the top contextual toolbar, if we click on the option here to select people, I've already run this once. It takes a little bit of time to find them, but if we just click on this and I scroll over each of these individuals, you'll see that it's found all of these different girls pretty much completely. Let's just have a look at that. If I click on one of these people, I can select the entire person, or I can merely select just elements like hair, eyebrows. It's going to struggle to find eyebrows, iris in the eye, nose, and as I move over these, you'll see the selection change. Upper body skin, lower clothes, upper body skin. So you've got a whole bunch of tools here that will allow you to select individual aspects. So let's just say we want the entire person, and that's what we want. So let's say apply, and we'll have a mask that's just selected that entire girl, and maybe we want to make some adjustments. Now you'll see here that again, with everything in Photoshop, it's not perfect all of the time. In fact, it's not perfect quite a lot of the time, but it's a good starting off point. So it's made a selection of the girl, her face, most of her clothing, but it's missed out on this part. And so we can simply go in with our quick selection tool and just add those in, depending on what we want to see. And then it gets a little bit messy once we start to move on to the other girl, and what's in the background is a little bit messy. But certainly that select people tool is really useful for certain things. When you have a group of people, it can quite quickly identify nearly all of the people in the image. So again, only in Photoshop, and it's in using the object selection tool and then choosing select people. And just make sure when you're using those selection tools, you've got the option of, let's just discard that. When we start to select things, we need to use the on the cloud rather than on the computer, because it will work in a much better way. Now you'll see now that I've actually gone back to a selection of all of the girls. Let's just change back to my quick selection tool, and it's made a really nice selection. Let's just show, there it is. It's made a pretty good selection of the girls, and so in most cases it's pretty good. That's another tool, again, only in Photoshop. Now for our final new tool, again only in Photoshop, we need to have the contextual menu around. We're working on an image. Let's stick with the 4 girls for the moment. We have an option up here in the contextual menu called Adjust Colors, and if we click on that, it will have a look at the image and the colors within the image and try and identify which are the dominant colors in the image, and it will throw up here a palette of different colors and allow us to adjust those individual colors. Now it creates a hue saturation adjustment layer with a mask. So let's just say we wanted to adjust the yellows, and let's say I wanted to change the color of the yellows slightly. If I move that slider backwards and forwards, you'll see it's picked out the yellows in the image, which it sort of also includes bits in the dresses and so forth. So you need to be fairly selective how you use this. We can increase or decrease the saturation, and so it's a quick way of finding individual colors. Now depending on the type of image, sometimes, let's say this is the red color, it's going to pick up colors that are a little bit including other colors as well. So sorry, I've picked the yellow one as well. Let's just undo that. Let's go back to the reds only, and you'll see that it's messing around with those colors. In some cases it's going to be useful, not so much in this one. Let's have a look at another image here, which is from 2 small boys in Lhasa in Tibet. Let's have a look at adjust the colors. Maybe I'd like to just change the color of his shirt and his trousers. We can do that quite effectively, and it works quite well. And of course we do have a mask so that we can then selectively apply them to different parts of the image that we may or may not want to affect. So again, it's a tool only in Photoshop. It has some use. It really identifies the primary colors. If you've got areas of very strong color in an image, that you want to identify quite quickly, this can be useful. But as you can see, it picks up a lot of extraneous colors, and you may then have to just then mask them out. But they are the most useful tools in this new version of Photoshop and Lightroom. Some are great, some are not so great, but still useful. So I hope all that's been useful, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for watching.